Have you ever been cast aside like yesterday's trash, treated as though your years of faithful service meant nothing at all? Today's story plunges into the raw ache of humiliation and dismissal, but it carries within it a truth so powerful about grace and forgiveness that it might forever alter how you respond to those who wound you most deeply. This is a tale of two men, one pointing finger, and the moment when pride finally bowed before something far greater. 58 years pressing a mop into tile floors had carved valleys into the knuckles of Christian Beckett's weathered hands. The morning sun slanted through the 47th floor windows of Harrison Tower, painting the polished marble in amber light. Christian pushed his cleaning cart down the executive corridor, wheels squeaking their familiar rhythm against the silence. His dark grey workshirt bore a name patch stitched in yellow thread. His khaki work pants, pressed but faded from 1,000 washings, hung loose on his frame. At 58, his face carried the gentle lines of someone who smiled often, despite having little reason to do so. Thin wisps of grey-brown hair crowned his head. His shoulders, though bent from decades of labour, still moved with quiet purpose. He had cleaned these floors for 12 years, 12 years of arriving before dawn and leaving after dusk. 12 years of corners no one else noticed, and bathrooms no one else wanted to touch. 12 years of being invisible. The executives rushed past him daily without a glance. Security guards nodded, but rarely spoke. The only people who knew his name were the night shift crew, and perhaps 3 administrative assistants who occasionally said hello. Yet Christian loved his work. He saw it as service, as calling, as something that mattered beyond the paycheck that barely covered his studio apartment rent. Every morning at 5:45, before the first executive arrived, Christian would pause in the empty conference room on the 47th floor. He would bow his head and whisper words over the building, words of protection, words of peace, words of blessing over people who did not know he existed. His supervisor once caught him and laughed, calling it superstition. Christian had simply smiled and returned to mopping. In his cart, beneath the bleach bottles and microfiber cloths, Christian kept a small leather book, no bigger than his palm. The cover had worn smooth from handling, pages bent at corners, margins filled with tiny handwritten notes in fading blue ink. He had carried that book through 3 marriages, 2 funerals, 4 different apartments, and 1 bankruptcy. It was the only possession he truly treasured. That morning, Christian hummed softly as he emptied the trash bins in the executive offices. He did not know that in exactly 47 minutes, everything would change. Marcus Caldwell arrived at 7:30 sharp, as he did every Tuesday. At 37 years old, Marcus had clawed his way to Director of Operations through ruthlessness disguised as ambition. His charcoal suit fit perfectly across his shoulders. His dark hair swept back with the precision of someone who paid attention to every detail. His jawline remained sharp, his gaze sharper still. He had built his reputation on efficiency, on cutting waste, on eliminating anything that did not directly contribute to quarterly earnings. Sentiment was weakness, compassion was waste. Results were all that mattered. Marcus had never learned Christian's name, though they had shared the same building for over a decade. To Marcus, janitors were simply part of the infrastructure, like heating systems or elevator cables, necessary but unremarkable, replaceable. He noticed them only when they failed to perform, and this morning Marcus had noticed. Specifically, he had noticed that someone had complained, not about Christian directly, but about the cleanliness of the executive washroom on the 47th floor. The complaint came from Gerald Rothman, the senior vice president, who had found a single paper towel on the floor near the sink. 1 paper towel, that was all, but for Marcus, 1 paper towel represented failure of protocol. It represented sloppiness. It represented an employee who had stopped caring about excellence, and Marcus Caldwell did not tolerate employees who stopped caring. He found Christian in the corridor, replacing light bulbs in the overhead fixtures. Christian stood on a small stepladder, his weathered hands unscrewing a burned-out tube. He glanced down when Marcus's expensive shoes clicked against the marble, stopping directly beside the ladder's base. "You?" Marcus said, his voice flat and cold as January wind. Christian carefully set the old bulb into his cart and climbed down the 3 steps, wiping his palms on his work pants. "Good morning, sir. Something I can help with?" Marcus did not return the greeting. Instead, he pulled his phone from his suit pocket and tapped the screen. There was a complaint yesterday. Paper towel on the floor. Executive washroom. Your section. Christian's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I clean that washroom 3 times per shift. If I miss something, I apologize. I'll double-check it right now." "That won't be necessary," Marcus said. His finger rose, pointing directly at Christian's chest. "I've reviewed your file. You're 58 years old. You've been with us for 12 years. Your performance reviews have been adequate but not exceptional. We're implementing new efficiency standards, and frankly, you don't meet them." The words landed like hammer blows. Christian felt his throat tighten. "Sir, I've never received a written warning. My supervisor says I do good work. I arrive early every day. I've never called in sick. I don't understand what efficiency standards you're referring to." "The standards I'm implementing," Marcus said, his tone indicating that no further explanation would follow. "I'm terminating your employment effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay. That's more than generous given your position." Time seemed to slow, like honey dripping from a spoon. Christian looked at the man before him. Really looked. Beneath the expensive suit and confident posture, he saw something else. Exhaustion around the eyes, tension in the jaw, the posture of someone who had built walls so high around himself that he had forgotten what sunlight felt like. Christian felt no anger rising in his chest. Instead, he felt sadness. Deep, aching sadness for this young man who had mistaken cruelty for strength. "I understand, sir," Christian said quietly. "I'm sorry I disappointed you." Marcus's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Perhaps surprise that Christian had not argued. Perhaps annoyance that his dismissal had not produced the expected groveling. "Your supervisor will process your final paperwork. Security's on their way." Christian nodded. He reached into his cart and withdrew the small leather book, holding it gently. Then he did something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. Christian extended his hand, offering a handshake. "Thank you for the years I was able to work here," Christian said. "I'll pray for your success, Mr. Caldwell, and for peace in your heart." Marcus did not take the offered hand. Instead, he stared at it as though Christian had offered him something contaminated. "Prayer," he said with a laugh that held no humor. "Prayer doesn't pay bills. Prayer doesn't produce results. Save it for someone who believes in fairy tales." Christian lowered his hand, but kept his gentle smile. "All the same, sir, I will pray for you." 2 security guards arrived, young men who looked uncomfortable with their assignment. They knew Christian. He had cleaned the security office for years, had brought them coffee during their overnight shifts, had asked about their families. Now they stood awkwardly, waiting to escort him out like a criminal. "Come on, Christian," one of them said softly. "Let's get your things." Christian gathered his few belongings from the janitor's closet. A thermos, a faded photograph of his late wife, a small wooden cross that someone had given him years ago. As he was leaving, he paused beside the cart he had pushed for 12 years. Carefully, he placed his small leather book on top of the bleach bottles. "Forgot something?" one guard asked. "No," Christian said. "Left something, on purpose." They walked him through the lobby, past the marble fountain, past the security desk where he had signed in 1,000 mornings, past the revolving doors that had spun him into this building at dawn and out again at dusk, over and over, seasons passing like pages in a book no one read. The April morning air hit his face. Traffic rushed past. Sirens wailed somewhere distant. Christian stood on the sidewalk, unemployed for the first time in 12 years, and felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders like a coat made of stones. He was 58. He had $700 in his bank account. He had rent due in 3 weeks. He had no family, no safety net, no plan. Yet as he walked toward the bus stop, his lips moved in whispered words. Words of thanks, words of trust, words that asked for strength, and words, strange as it seemed, that asked for blessing upon Marcus Caldwell. The bus ride to his apartment took 40 minutes. Christian sat in the back, watching the city slide past the smudged windows. Young professionals in their 20s and 30s rushed along sidewalks, faces buried in phones, chasing futures they believed they could control. Christian once had been young like that, full of plans, full of certainty. Life had taught him differently. Life had taught him that the only thing he could truly control was how he responded when everything fell apart. His studio apartment occupied the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned years ago. Paint peeled from walls, plumbing groaned. The elevator worked 1 week in every 3, but it was home. His bed fit in one corner, his small table and single chair occupied another. A hot plate on the counter served as his kitchen. A bathroom barely large enough to turn around in completed the space. Christian sat at his table and opened a notebook, one of 7 identical journals he had filled over the years. Each page contained names, dates, prayers written in his careful handwriting. He turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Marcus Caldwell, Director, terminated my employment today. Angry, hurting, needs peace, needs love, needs to know he matters beyond his accomplishments." Then Christian bowed his head over that page and spoke aloud, as though someone sat across from him at the table. He spoke for 7 minutes. When he finished, he felt the familiar warmth that always came after such conversations. Not happiness, exactly. More like certainty. More like knowing that despite appearances, something larger was at work. That night, Christian ate a simple dinner of bread and soup. He reviewed the help-wanted section of the newspaper, circling possibilities with a worn pencil. Custodian needed at county hospital, maintenance worker for apartment complex, night porter for hotel downtown. Each job paid less than Harrison Tower. Each job would mean harder work, longer hours. But Christian had never been afraid of hard work. Before bed, he stood at his single window and looked out over the city lights. Somewhere in those lights, Marcus Caldwell sat in an office or a home, convinced that he had made a good decision, a necessary decision, an efficient decision. Christian whispered one more prayer for the man who had discarded him, then climbed into bed and slept the sleep of someone whose conscience was clear. He did not know that at exactly the same moment, 7 miles across the city, everything was beginning to unravel for Marcus Caldwell. Marcus's daughter was named Sophie. She was 8 years old, with dark curls that bounced when she ran, and eyes that sparkled when she laughed. She loved painting pictures of flowers, and reading books about animals, and asking questions that Marcus rarely had time to answer. She was bright and curious and kind, everything her father was not. Marcus loved her fiercely, in the only way he knew how. He provided for her. He ensured she attended the best private school. He hired the best tutors. He opened investment accounts for her future. He measured his love in dollars and opportunities, because those were the only metrics he understood. He did not know how to measure love in hours, in presence, in attention. Those things did not fit on quarterly reports. Sophie lived primarily with her mother, Marcus's ex-wife Victoria, in a house on the north side of the city. Marcus saw his daughter every other weekend and 1 evening per week. He brought expensive gifts. He took her to restaurants where she sat quietly, overwhelmed by adult conversation. He checked his phone constantly, even during their time together, because emergencies always seemed to arise at work. Sophie never complained. She simply accepted that this was what having a father meant. Wednesday morning, the day after Christian's termination, Sophie woke early for school. She dressed in her uniform. She ate her breakfast of cereal and orange juice. She kissed her mother goodbye and climbed into the car that took her to the academy. Everything proceeded normally until it didn't. At 10:15 in the morning, during third period mathematics, Sophie's head suddenly dropped forward onto her desk. Her teacher, Mr. Henderson, thought she had fallen asleep. He walked over, ready to gently wake her with a reminder about classroom attention. Then he noticed that Sophie was not sleeping. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Her breathing had become shallow and rapid. Her skin had turned the color of old paper. "Sophie?" Mr. Henderson touched her shoulder. No response. "Sophie, can you hear me?" The other students turned to stare. Someone gasped. Mr. Henderson's training kicked in. He pressed the emergency button on his desk phone. Within seconds, the school nurse arrived, and within minutes, an ambulance had been called. Victoria received the call at her office. The words did not make sense at first. Collapsed, unresponsive, hospital, ambulance. She grabbed her purse and ran for her car, hands shaking so badly she could barely start the engine. She did not call Marcus immediately. Their relationship remained strained even 4 years after the divorce. She told herself she would wait until she knew more, until doctors had examined Sophie, until someone could explain what was happening. By the time Victoria reached St. Thomas Medical Center, Sophie had been taken to the emergency department. Doctors surrounded her small form on the hospital bed. Machines beeped. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency. Victoria stood outside the room, watching through a window, feeling helpless as a paper boat in a hurricane. A doctor emerged after 20 minutes. "Mrs. Caldwell." "Yes." "What's happening? What's wrong with my daughter?" The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and tired shoulders, gestured toward chairs in the hallway. They sat. "We're running comprehensive tests. Her vitals are stable but unusual. Her brain activity shows abnormal patterns we're trying to understand. There's no immediate sign of stroke, seizure, or cardiac event. We're checking for infections, toxins, metabolic disorders. Right now, we simply don't know what caused the collapse." "Is she awake?" "No. She's in what we call a hypnagogic state. Not quite sleeping, not quite conscious. We're monitoring her closely." Victoria felt tears burning her eyes. "Will she be okay?" The doctor's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but Victoria noticed. "We're doing everything we can." At 11:30, Victoria finally called Marcus. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Marcus's voice went from irritated to shocked to cold with control. "I'm on my way," he said, and ended the call. He arrived at the hospital 17 minutes later, having broken multiple traffic laws. He found Victoria in the waiting area outside the emergency department. They did not embrace. They had not embraced in years. Instead, they stood facing each other, two people who once promised forever, and now could barely stand being in the same room. "Tell me everything," Marcus demanded. Victoria recounted what little she knew. Marcus listened without interruption, his face an unreadable mask. When she finished, he simply nodded and walked toward Sophie's room. A nurse intercepted him, explaining that only one visitor at a time was allowed. Marcus's hand moved toward his wallet, as though prepared to solve this problem with money. Then he stopped himself. "Please," he said instead, his voice cracking slightly on the word. "Please let me see my daughter." The nurse's expression softened. "5 minutes. Then you'll need to step out while we run more tests." Sophie lay perfectly still beneath white sheets. Monitors surrounded her, displaying numbers and graphs that Marcus did not understand. Her curls spread across the pillow. Her small hands rested on top of the blanket. Her chest rose and fell with each breath, but her eyes remained closed. She looked smaller than Marcus remembered, more fragile, like something precious he had been careless with and might now lose forever. Marcus took her hand. It felt cool against his palm. "Sophie," he whispered, "Daddy's here. Everything's going to be fine. I promise. Everything's going to be fine." But for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Caldwell was making a promise he had absolutely no power to keep. The hours that followed blurred together like watercolors in rain. Test after test, doctor after doctor, consultation after consultation. They moved Sophie to the pediatric intensive care unit on the 4th floor. Victoria and Marcus took turns sitting beside her bed, maintaining their careful distance even in crisis. Neither ate, neither slept. They simply waited, watching machines breathe for a child who seemed to be slowly slipping away from them. By Thursday morning, every test had come back normal. No infection, no toxin, no genetic disorder, no physical trauma, no explanation whatsoever. Sophie's body functioned perfectly, yet her mind remained locked in some unreachable place. The doctors spoke in careful medical language that translated to 3 simple words. "We don't know." "There must be something," Marcus insisted during a meeting with the hospital's chief neurologist. "Some test you haven't run, some specialist you haven't consulted. This is a major medical center. You have resources. Use them." The neurologist, a man named Dr. Ibrahim, who had practiced medicine for 30 years, met Marcus's anger with calm patience. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand your frustration. We have consulted with colleagues across the country. We have run every diagnostic protocol available. Your daughter's condition does not match any known medical pattern. Sometimes the human body presents mysteries that current medical science cannot immediately solve. That does not mean we stop trying. It means we remain vigilant and supportive while continuing to search for answers." "That's not good enough," Marcus said, his voice rising. "My daughter is lying in that bed, and you're telling me you have no idea why? That's completely unacceptable." "I agree," Dr. Ibrahim said quietly. "It is unacceptable. It is also our current reality. I wish I had better answers for you." Marcus stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. He stormed from the conference room, down the hallway, past the nurse's station, through the double doors marked exit, and into the stairwell. There, finally alone, he pressed his back against the cold concrete wall and felt something he had not felt in 15 years. Fear. Not the manageable concern that arose during quarterly earnings reports, not the calculated risk assessment of business decisions. Real fear, primal fear, the terror of knowing that all his money, all his power, all his carefully constructed control meant absolutely nothing. His daughter was dying, and he could not stop it. Marcus slid down the wall until he sat on the floor, expensive suit wrinkling, and buried his face in his hands. No tears came. He had forgotten how to cry long ago. But his chest heaved with something that wanted to be tears, something that might have been grief or regret, or the sudden recognition that he had spent 37 years building a life on the wrong foundation. He stayed there for 17 minutes before forcing himself to stand, straightening his tie, and returning to his daughter's room. Victoria sat beside Sophie's bed, holding their daughter's hand, singing softly. An old lullaby Marcus vaguely remembered from when Sophie was an infant. Victoria had a lovely voice. Marcus had forgotten that too. He had forgotten so many things that mattered. "Any change?" he asked. Victoria shook her head without looking at him. The nurse said her brain activity decreased slightly in the last hour. They're concerned she might be slipping deeper. They're considering putting her on additional life support. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. No, that can't happen. She's going to wake up. She has to wake up." "What if she doesn't?" Victoria's voice broke. "What if this is it? What if we're losing her and there's nothing we can do?" Marcus had no answer. He stood helplessly, staring at his daughter, and felt the universe laughing at his impotence. That evening, a chaplain arrived. Hospital policy required chaplains to visit pediatric intensive care families. The chaplain was a gentlewoman in her 60s who introduced herself as Reverend Patricia. She offered to pray with them. Victoria accepted. Marcus walked out. He could not pray. Prayer required belief in something beyond himself, and Marcus Caldwell believed only in what he could measure, manage, and manipulate. Prayer was for weak people who could not solve their own problems. Prayer was for people who needed comforting fairy tales instead of facing reality. Except reality was offering no solutions. Marcus spent that night in the hospital cafeteria, drinking bad coffee and staring at his phone. Work emails piled up unread. Meetings passed unattended. For the first time in his career, Marcus Caldwell simply did not care about work. All that mattered was the small form lying motionless 4 floors above him. Around 2 in the morning, sitting alone at a plastic table under fluorescent lights, Marcus remembered something, a conversation, a moment. A man who had said he would pray, Christian Beckett, the janitor he had fired 2 days ago. Marcus did not believe in prayer. He did not believe in anything supernatural. But he remembered the absolute certainty in Christian's voice, the peace in his expression despite being humiliated and dismissed, the inexplicable kindness of offering to pray for someone who had just destroyed his livelihood. Marcus pulled up the HR database on his phone. He scrolled through terminated employee files until he found Christian Beckett's record. Address listed, phone number listed. Marcus stared at the information for a long time. This was insane, completely insane. What was he thinking? That some fired janitor had magical prayer powers, that somehow this old man could do what an entire team of doctors could not? Ridiculous, absurd, desperate. Yet Marcus found himself copying the address into his phone's navigation app. At 2:43 in the morning, Marcus Caldwell left the hospital, climbed into his luxury sedan, and drove across the city to a neighborhood he would normally avoid. Streetlights flickered, graffiti-covered walls. Homeless people slept in doorways. Marcus's car looked obscenely out of place. He found Christian's building and stood outside for 7 minutes, arguing with himself. This was madness. He should turn around, go back to the hospital, wait for medical science to provide answers. Except medical science had no answers. And his daughter was dying. Marcus entered the building. The lobby smelled of old cooking oil and mildew. The elevator had an out-of-order sign taped to its doors. Marcus climbed 3 flights of stairs, his dress shoes echoing in the stairwell. He found apartment 314 and raised his fist to knock, then hesitated. What was he doing here? What would he even say? "Hello, sorry I destroyed your life 2 days ago, but could you help me now?" The arrogance of it was staggering. The entitlement, the sheer audacity of showing up and asking for anything after what he had done. Marcus almost left, almost turned around and walked back down those stairs. But then he thought of Sophie, of her curls on the pillow, of her closed eyes, of her slipping away. And he knocked. Silence. Then shuffling footsteps. The door opened, chain still attached, and Christian Beckett's weathered face appeared in the gap. He wore an old robe over pajamas, his thin hair stuck up at odd angles. He blinked sleep from his eyes, trying to focus on his unexpected visitor. Recognition dawned slowly. "Mr. Caldwell?" Marcus's carefully prepared words died in his throat. Standing before this man he had humiliated, he found himself unable to speak. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His hands trembled. His vision blurred. Christian studied him for a moment, then quietly closed the door. Marcus heard the chain rattle. The door opened fully. "Come in," Christian said simply. The studio apartment was exactly what Marcus expected. Small, worn, sparse. Yet somehow it felt warmer than Marcus's expensive penthouse ever had. Christian gestured to the single chair at his small table. Marcus sat. Christian filled a kettle with water and set it on his hot plate. "Tea?" Christian asked. "I don't drink tea," Marcus said automatically, then caught himself. "But thank you." Christian made tea anyway, setting a chipped mug in front of Marcus before taking a seat on the edge of his bed, the only other place to sit. They looked at each other across the small space. The silence stretched. Finally, Marcus spoke. "My daughter is dying." Christian said nothing, simply waited. "She collapsed yesterday, at school. No one knows why. Every test comes back normal, but she won't wake up. The doctors say she's slipping deeper. They're talking about life support. I've spent $40,000 on specialists in 2 days, and none of them can tell me what's wrong or how to fix it." Marcus's voice cracked. "I can't fix it. I can't fix it, and I don't know what to do." Christian nodded slowly. "What's her name?" "Sophie. She's 8. She likes painting and books and asking questions I never have time to answer." The words came faster now, like a dam breaking. "I'm a terrible father. I work all the time. I miss her recitals and parent-teacher meetings. I check my phone during our dinners together. She deserves so much better than me, and now she's dying, and I never told her how much she means to me. I never told her that she's the only thing in my entire life that actually matters." Tears finally came. Marcus Caldwell, who prided himself on control, who saw emotion as weakness, who had not cried since childhood, wept openly in a janitor's apartment at 3 in the morning. Great heaving sobs that shook his shoulders and left him gasping for air. Christian moved from the bed to kneel beside Marcus's chair. He placed one weathered hand on Marcus's shoulder and simply held it there. He did not speak, did not offer empty platitudes, did not say everything would be fine. He simply sat with Marcus in his grief, offering the only thing he could, presence. When the storm finally passed, Marcus wiped his eyes with his suit sleeve. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for coming here, for waking you, for what I did to you, for all of it." "I know," Christian said gently, "and I forgive you." Marcus looked up sharply. "Just like that? I destroyed your livelihood. I humiliated you in front of security guards. I mocked your faith. And you just forgive me?" Christian smiled, that gentle smile Marcus remembered. "Just like that. Why? Because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it would hurt you. And because I believe that every person deserves grace, especially when they don't deserve it." "Especially then," Marcus shook his head. "I don't understand you." "That's okay," Christian said. "You don't have to understand. You just have to let me help." "How? How can you possibly help? Are you a doctor, a specialist?" "No," Christian said, "but I know someone who is. And you came here because some part of you, even the part that doesn't believe, wondered if maybe I could pray, if maybe it might make a difference." He paused. "So let me pray, Marcus, please. Let me pray for your daughter." Marcus felt his cynicism rising, his natural defense against anything he could not control or measure. Prayer did not work. Prayer was superstition. Prayer was for people who could not face reality. But reality had offered nothing, and his daughter was dying. "Yes," Marcus heard himself say, "please, please pray for Sophie." Christian stood and moved to his small table. He opened a drawer and withdrew one of his leather-bound journals, turning to a page near the back. Then he returned to Marcus and knelt again, this time taking both of Marcus's hands in his own. His grip was firm despite his age, calloused, strong, real. "Father," Christian began, and Marcus felt something shift in the room, something he could not name, something that made the air feel heavy and light simultaneously. "I come to you now on behalf of Marcus and his daughter Sophie. I don't understand why this trial has come to their family. I don't have answers or explanations, but I know you see them. I know you love that little girl more than her earthly father ever could. I know you have not forgotten them." Christian's voice remained steady, conversational, as though speaking to someone actually present in the room. "I ask for your mercy, Father. I ask for your healing hand to touch Sophie. I ask that whatever darkness has gripped her would be broken, that her mind would clear, that her eyes would open. I ask this not because I deserve to ask it, but because you are good, because you are kind, because you love to give good gifts to your children." Marcus felt his hands trembling in Christian's grip, felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling, felt something he had not felt since childhood, something that might have been hope or might have been the first stirrings of faith. "And Father," Christian continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I ask that you would comfort Marcus, that you would let him know he is not alone, that you would show him that he does not have to carry this burden by himself, that you love him despite everything, despite his mistakes, despite his hardness. Show him your heart, Father. Let him see how much you treasure him. The prayer lasted perhaps 5 minutes. When Christian finished, he squeezed Marcus's hands once and released them. Marcus sat motionless, unable to speak. Something had happened. He did not understand it, could not explain it, but he felt different, lighter, as though he had set down a weight he had been carrying so long he had forgotten it was there. Thank you, Marcus whispered. Don't thank me yet, Christian said with a small smile. Let's see what happens. Marcus glanced at his watch, 3:27 in the morning. He needed to get back to the hospital. He needed to be there when Victoria woke, needed to be there for Sophie. He stood, and Christian walked him to the door. Mr. Beckett, Marcus said, turning back, I know words mean nothing at this point, but I'm genuinely sorry for firing you, for treating you the way I did. You deserved better. And when Sophie wakes up, he caught himself. If Sophie wakes up, I want to make this right. I want to rehire you with a raise and a formal apology to the entire staff. You deserve that much at least. Christian tilted his head, studying Marcus with those kind eyes. When she wakes up, he said gently, correcting Marcus's conditional. We can talk about work, but right now, just go be with your daughter. Tell her you love her. Tell her she's more important than any business deal or quarterly report. Tell her all the things you should have said before, because words matter, Marcus. Words have power, and she needs to hear yours. Marcus nodded, unable to trust his voice. He left the apartment, descended the stairs, and drove back across the city. The sky had begun to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Thursday morning was arriving, bringing with it either hope or heartbreak. He reached the hospital at 4:15, took the elevator to the 4th floor, approached Sophie's room with his heart hammering. The nurse at the station looked up as he passed, and something in her expression made him freeze. Mr. Caldwell, she said, standing quickly, you should go in. Terror seized him. She's gone, his mind screamed. I'm too late. I should never have left. I should have been here. Is she? Go in, the nurse repeated, but she was smiling. Marcus pushed through the door to Sophie's room. Victoria sat beside the bed, clutching Sophie's hand, tears streaming down her face. But these were different tears, joy tears, relief tears, because Sophie's eyes were open. Daddy! Sophie's voice came out hoarse and weak, but it was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. He crossed the room in 3 strides, falling to his knees beside her bed, taking her small face in his hands. Sophie, oh, Sophie, I'm here. I'm right here. Where am I? She asked, confused. What happened? You were sick, sweetheart, but you're better now. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Doctors rushed in, drawn by the alarms from Sophie's monitors. They examined her, asked questions, checked vitals. Dr. Ibrahim arrived within minutes, studying her with an expression of wonder and bewilderment. This is impossible, he murmured. Her brain activity has completely normalized. The abnormal patterns are gone. It's as though nothing was ever wrong. How? Victoria asked. What changed? Dr. Ibrahim shook his head slowly. I have absolutely no medical explanation. Sometimes the body heals itself in ways we cannot predict or understand. This is one of those times. I would call it a miracle, but I'm a man of science. Marcus met the doctor's eyes. Maybe science doesn't explain everything. Maybe not, Dr. Ibrahim agreed quietly. Sophie remained in the hospital for 3 more days under observation. Her recovery continued to baffle the medical staff. Every test came back perfect. Within 48 hours, she was sitting up, eating, laughing, asking when she could go home. The doctors finally discharged her with instructions to follow up in 2 weeks, though no one expected to find anything wrong. Marcus took a full week off work, the first time he had done so in 7 years. He brought Sophie home to Victoria's house and stayed in the guest room, unwilling to leave his daughter's side. He read her favorite books. He watched her paint pictures. He listened to her questions and actually tried to answer them. He put his phone on silent and left it in another room. On the 8th day after Sophie's collapse, Marcus drove back to Christian's apartment building. He climbed those same 3 flights of stairs, knocked on that same door. Christian answered, looking unsurprised to see him. "She's fine," Marcus said without preamble. "Completely recovered. The doctors have no explanation. They're calling it spontaneous remission." "I know," Christian said simply. "How could you know?" "I didn't call." Christian tapped his chest. "I know. Here. I knew Thursday morning at 4 o'clock when I felt the release. When the burden lifted. That's how it works sometimes." Marcus swallowed hard. "I don't understand any of this. I don't understand faith or prayer or whatever happened. But I know my daughter was dying, and I know she's not dying now, and I know the only thing that changed was you praying." "It wasn't me," Christian said gently. "I was just the one who asked. The healing came from someone much bigger than me." They stood looking at each other for a moment. Then Marcus said, "I meant what I told you. About your job. About making things right. I want to rehire you. I want to promote you to facilities manager. Better pay, better hours, real benefits. You deserve it." Christian smiled. "That's very kind, Marcus. But I already found a new job. At a nursing home across town. It pays less than Harrison Tower did, but the people there need someone who cares, who will talk to them, who will listen. I think I'm meant to be there. You're turning down a better job? To work at a nursing home?" Marcus could not hide his incredulity. "Service isn't about money, Marcus. It's about people. It's about showing up and seeing folks who feel invisible. It's about doing small things with great love. I learned that a long time ago." Marcus felt humbled again, the way he had in this apartment a week ago. "Then at least let me do something. Let me donate to the nursing home, cover your rent for a year. Something." "You want to do something?" Christian asked. "Then do this. Be the father Sophie needs. Not the father who provides everything except himself. The father who shows up, who listens, who puts his phone down and looks her in the eyes, who tells her she's loved not with gifts, but with time. Can you do that?" "I can try," Marcus whispered. "Then that's enough. That's more than enough." Marcus extended his hand. This time Christian took it. They shook firmly, 2 men from completely different worlds, who had briefly intersected in a moment of crisis and had both been transformed by it. As Marcus turned to leave, Christian spoke once more. "Marcus, one more thing." "Yes?" "Keep talking to him. The one I talked to for Sophie. He wants to hear from you, too. Not just in emergencies. Every day. In the good times and the hard times. He's been waiting for you to notice him for a long time." Marcus nodded slowly. He did not understand faith. Did not understand prayer, did not understand how an old janitor's words in a tiny apartment could have healed his daughter when millions of dollars of medical care could not. But he understood that something real had happened, something beyond spreadsheets and quarterly reports, something that mattered more than any business success ever could. "I'll try," he said again. "I promise I'll try." "That's all he asks," Christian said. "Just try." Marcus left the building and stood on the sidewalk in the morning sun. The neighborhood still looked run down, still smelled of cooking oil and decay, still housed people whom Marcus would have walked past without noticing just 2 weeks ago. But now he saw them differently, saw their dignity, saw their worth, saw that wealth did not determine value and power did not determine importance. He climbed into his car and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Then, feeling slightly foolish but unable to stop himself, he spoke aloud to the empty vehicle. "I don't know if you're real. I don't know if you can hear me. But if you can, thank you. Thank you for Sophie. Thank you for Christian. Thank you for giving me a second chance I didn't deserve. Help me to do better. Help me to be better. I'm going to try. I promise I'm going to try." No voice answered. No miraculous sign appeared. But Marcus felt that same lightness he had felt in Christian's apartment, that sense of weightlifting, of not being alone, of being seen by someone who loved him despite everything he had done and everything he had failed to do. He started the car and drove toward Victoria's house, where his daughter waited, where he had a chance to be present for her in ways he never had before, where he could show through actions that he had learned something from being broken open. The city rushed past his windows. Traffic lights changed. People hurried along sidewalks. The world continued spinning, indifferent to the small drama that had played out in one hospital room and one tiny apartment. But Marcus Caldwell was different, fundamentally different, changed in ways he could not fully articulate, but could not deny. He thought about the worn leather book Christian kept beneath his cleaning supplies, about the journals filled with names and prayers, about a man who saw his job not as drudgery, but as ministry, about someone who chose to pray for those who persecuted him instead of hating them. Marcus realized he had spent 37 years climbing a ladder only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. He had built an empire of success on a foundation of sand. He had gained the whole world while losing his soul, and it had taken his daughter nearly dying to wake him up. But he was awake now. 3 months later, Sophie had her 9th birthday party. Marcus was there, not checking his phone, not answering emails, just there. Fully present. He watched her blow out candles. He helped her open presents. He listened to her tell stories about school and friends, and the new puppy Victoria had finally agreed to adopt. At one point, Sophie climbed into his lap, something she had not done in over a year. She laid her head against his chest, and Marcus wrapped his arms around her, feeling the weight and warmth of her, the reality of her, the miracle of her continued existence. "Daddy?" she said softly. "Yes, sweetheart. I like you better now." The simple honesty of it struck him like an arrow through the heart. "I like me better too," he admitted, "and I'm going to keep getting better. I promise." "Okay," she said, satisfied with that answer, and went back to playing with her friends. Marcus watched her go, watched her laugh and run and simply be alive, and felt gratitude so intense it hurt. He had been given a gift he did not deserve, a second chance, a wake-up call before it was too late. At Harrison Tower, Marcus had implemented new policies, mandatory vacation days for all staff, better benefits for maintenance workers, a program where executives spent 1 day per quarter doing entry-level jobs to understand the full operation. He had gone to the janitorial staff personally and apologized for firing Christian, explaining that he had been wrong and that the decision did not reflect their value to the company. Several executives had quietly expressed concern that Marcus was becoming soft, that he was losing his edge, that efficiency and profits were slipping. Marcus had listened to their concerns and then told them something that would have been unthinkable 4 months earlier. If treating people with dignity costs us profit, then we need to rethink what we're measuring, because I've learned that the only things that truly matter cannot be calculated on a spreadsheet. Some executives had nodded thoughtfully. Others had begun quietly looking for other positions. Marcus did not mind. He was building something different now, something that valued people over percentages, something that might actually matter when he reached the end of his life and looked back. He still struggled. Old habits died hard. He still caught himself checking his phone too often, still caught himself prioritizing work over relationships, still caught himself measuring worth by productivity. But he was trying. Every day he was trying. And every morning before the sun rose, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a leather-bound journal he had bought to mirror Christian's. He would open to a blank page and write down names, people who needed help, people who were struggling, people he had wronged, and then he would speak aloud, feeling awkward and uncertain, but speaking nonetheless. He was learning to pray. It did not come naturally. He did not hear voices or see visions. But sometimes, in the quiet of those early mornings, he felt something. Warmth, presence, peace, the sense that someone was listening, that someone cared, that he was not navigating life alone. One morning, 6 months after Sophie's recovery, Marcus added a new name to his journal, Christian Beckett, and beside the name he wrote, "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Thank you for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for praying when I couldn't. Thank you for being the answer to a prayer I didn't know I was praying. May you continue to be a light in dark places. May you continue to see the invisible. May you continue to love those who feel unlovable. And may you know how much your simple faithfulness changed everything for one broken man and his dying daughter." Then Marcus bowed his head and prayed for the janitor who had lost his job but never lost his faith, who had been humiliated but responded with grace, who had been mocked for his beliefs but still offered to pray for his mocker. Marcus prayed for the man who had saved his daughter, not with medical expertise or financial resources, but with something far more powerful, genuine faith expressed through simple words spoken in a tiny apartment at 3 in the morning. And in that prayer, Marcus Caldwell finally understood what Christian had tried to tell him. It was never about the prayer. It was about the surrender, the willingness to admit he could not control everything, the humility to ask for help from someone greater than himself, the courage to trust that maybe, just maybe, there was more to existence than what could be measured, managed, and manipulated. Marcus closed his journal and sat in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the sky slowly lighten. Birds began singing. The city began stirring. Another day was beginning, full of meetings and decisions and countless small moments that could be approached with either fear or faith. Marcus chose faith, not perfectly, not constantly, but more often than before, and that made all the difference. In a nursing home across the city, Christian Beckett was already awake, already making his rounds, already talking to residents who rarely received visitors, already listening to stories that no one else had time to hear, already demonstrating with his life what he believed with his heart, that every person matters, that no one is invisible, that the greatest thing anyone can do is simply show up, pay attention, and love others with the love they themselves have received. Christian did not know about Marcus's journal, did not know about the prayers being whispered in a penthouse apartment, did not know the full extent of what had grown from one act of forgiveness in one moment of crisis. But he did know this. Light always defeats darkness. Love always defeats hate. Grace always defeats judgment. And faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains or heal a dying child in a hospital bed. Christian pushed his cart through the nursing home hallways, humming softly, his worn leather journal tucked safely in his uniform pocket. He had work to do, people to serve, prayers to pray, a calling to fulfill. And somewhere in the city, a man who had once fired him was learning to be a father, a human, and perhaps someday a man of genuine faith. Learning that the things he had spent his life chasing mattered far less than the things he had ignored. 2 men, one pointing finger, one prayer in darkness, and a miracle that changed everything.